Hey, in this video we're looking at growing moss from seed. And believe it or not, just like the many tree species found around the world, the little tiny moss plants that you see growing on the forest floor produce and spread seeds much like their larger brothers and sisters, the trees. So in this video we're going to be looking at different ways to collect these moss seeds and then what to do with them. So right now we're looking at one of my favorite terrariums. And if you're not familiar with terrariums, basically what they are is they're a small living environment. And they have their own microclimate within this jar once the cap is put on. And the most important and incredible thing is they're self-sustained. The water that evaporates from the living moss will evaporate up towards the ceiling of the glass and collect and condense on the glass roof before falling back down towards the moss. And if anyone is interested in finding out more information on terrariums, send me a private message and maybe I'll end up doing a video. So this is another one of my favorite terrariums, and as you can see there's 2 or 3 different types of noticeable moss within this collection, and we'll be going over the different types of moss found here in Canada a little bit later in the video. But first, I just wanted to show you exactly what we're looking for when we're looking for moss seeds, and how we can pick them from the moss and end up storing them for later use in the future for planting. So again, what we're looking at now is the moss itself that's contained within this terrarium. And what I'm doing is I'm picking off the moss spores. And as you can see, this is a moss spore, or a moss seed. And what they do is they grow right from the moss itself out on these little tiny shoots, and at the very end there's a little cap. Now these caps are what you're trying to maintain. So I've got a small piece of wax paper, and I'm just going to go around and collect all the different type of moss spores I can and simply drop them right onto the wax paper. So as you can see, all I'm doing is going around and cleaning out the different moss, not only for moss spores, but also getting rid of different types of seeds and other decaying material that's fallen onto the forest floor and been caught into this moss. So as I mentioned, if people are interested, I might make a video on terrariums because they're so much fun to make, and if you have the proper ratio of organic matter into the terrarium glass, it's very easy to obtain this type of self-sustained environment within the glass. And there's different ways to release and gain and add more moisture if needed too. So as you can see, these little moss spores are very tiny. These tweezers I'm using are very small too, so it might look like a little bit bigger in context. However, they're almost the size of an eyelash, really. And one great way to figure out if your moss spores are ready is to ensure that the brown cap has changed from the green light color to a dark brown. So what I like to do is make these little tiny seed packages with the name of the material as well as where I found it and the date. And then all you do is you take that wax paper that we mentioned earlier and fold it up without creasing the edges, because you don't want to damage the moss spores at all. And you don't want to crease them as well, because they might get caught up in the crease and then lost or damaged. So then once you have it lightly rolled up, you can slip it into your paper seed container there, fold it over, and it's ready for storing. And one key thing to keep in mind is that the seeds are dried out fully before storing them. So now that we have the moss seeds all stored away, let's take a look at some different types of moss. So at the base of this moss collection here, we have something called ribbed bog moss. In Canada, this is fairly common, especially in southern Ontario. And as you can see, there are some moss spores coming out here as well. However, these moss spores are very deeply rooted within the moss, and you can tell that they're not quite ready to be picked. One sure sign that they are ready to be picked is that they've changed the color from the light green to a darker brown, and that unlike this moss spore here that's not ready to come out, they will just easily pop right out, and you can hang them off. And specifically, this is the shaggy peat moss, another very common moss here in Ontario. And it's a really light green, kind of looks almost like a fern. And as you can see up top here, there's a lot of different moss spores coming out here of what's called pincushion moss. And just like the name suggests, it's a really flat, evenly distributed moss. Almost looks like a carpet, very nice to the touch. And lichen, if you're not familiar with lichen, it isn't exactly a moss, but it's a very unique and very interesting type of specimen. There's many different types of lichen in Ontario, and look forward to a video coming out soon by Jeremiah Johnson 84 on lichen. It's just too interesting and too in-depth to talk about in one short video. So now moving around this moss specimen and different collection, we can see over here the different moss spores and different seeds coming out. And around the back here you can see some more on the pincushion moss. And so if you don't have a terrarium or any collections like this, which most people might not, simply head out to the forest into a nice cool shaded area where the moss is most predominant. And if you have a magnifying glass or even good eyes, look around and see if you can find any of these moss spores, because most likely they'll be growing in all different types of moss. Especially the shaggy peat moss, it's incredible the amount of spores that will come off of this moss. And they're not too slow to grow either, and we'll be looking at that in later videos as well. Now if we take an even closer look at this specific type of moss, you can see that I have some wood also within the moss here. And if you look really closely, you can see lichen, different types of small moss popping up, and the complexity is just so incredible. That's one of my favorite things about moss species and the forest floor in general. There's just so much going on if you take the time to take a deep look and really see what's going on there. So we'll take a quick look at my terrarium from a different view under different lighting, and as you can see, this might look like just one piece of clumped forest floor that was jammed into the terrarium itself, but in fact that's not true. With different types of moss, including juniper moss and plume moss that may differ from the last terrarium we looked at, it's just an incredible amount of diversity within these terrariums. And you'll notice that this one piece, though it looked like an entire rock collection or wood, it's many different pieces of rock and wood and moss put together to make it look like a larger scaled landscape. And that's one of my favorite things with working with these terrariums. You can mimic the large scale environment on a very small scale. And it's pretty magical if you ask me. One of my favorite pastimes. So watch out for a video coming up soon. And additionally, when working with these terrariums, it's important to be very patient and just enjoy what you're doing. It's easy to get frustrated, and that's why it's important to take a step back and just have fun with it, because there's a lot to learn and there's a lot going on in these small glass jars. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video with growing moss from seed. You can head out to the forest floor and collect those moss spores anytime. Just remember to look for a cool shaded area. So again, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out my series Growing Trees from Seed, where we look at different types of maples, oaks, birch trees, and other trees and how to store and save seeds. So thanks again. See you next time.